I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about perception. In our philosophy and our way of life, we talk often about the fact that we live in our minds and not in the world. We live in an outer world, you and I and all of us on this planet. But in truth, we live in our minds. The way that we see life, the way we respond to life, and the way that our thought process responds to the experiences of our life determines the quality of our days and the quality of our life. There's a story told of two women who were in a nursing home. They were sharing the room. One had a bed beside the door and the other had a bed beside the window. The one who was beside the window had the ability to see and to speak and was somewhat more mobile. But the one that was by the door couldn't see and had no sight and was very debilitated and ill. Over the course of several weeks and months, as these two dear ones lived together, they made a pact whereby the lady that was in the bed beside the window would tell the lady who was beside the door what was going on outside in the world outside of the nursing home. And the lady who was in the bed by the window would tell her friend about the changing seasons, about the fact that it was raining one day and there was beautiful showers coming down. Another day there was sunshine. She would tell her that the mailman was walking on the sidewalk outside the window, and that during the summer the mailman had short pants on and was happy and jovial, and in the winter the mailman wore a raincoat and dealt with the changing weather and situation. The one near the window would tell her friend that across the street was a park, a beautiful and wonderful place where there was life and activity. She'd tell her about the children who played in the park. She'd tell her about the two lovers who met in the park every week and caressed and kissed and shared their affection one for another. And the days and weeks and months went by with this sharing of what was going on outside. And even though these two ladies were confined to a nursing home, they were able to share that life was going on the outside. And especially the lady who couldn't see and wasn't able to get out of her bed was able to know what was going on outside. As fate would have it, the lady who was in the bed beside the window passed away. And so the lady by the door, of course, was depressed and unhappy because she wasn't able to know any longer what was going on outside. And after a few days passed, a new patient came in to share her room. She had a new roommate. A new lady was in the bed beside the window. And so the lady beside the door said to her new roommate, I had an arrangement with my old roommate, and she told me what was going on outside the window. It gave me such insight and such wonderful feelings about the way that life was outside and that life is going on. Could you do the same for me? And the new roommate who was beside the window said, I'd be pleased to. I'd be very happy to do that. And so the lady said, what's going on? What's outside the window? And the lady beside the window said, well, there's not much that I can tell you because outside the window there's a block wall and I can't see anything. This situation points out the differences that we have in the perception of our environment, how our mind acts and reacts and responds. The first roommate, though she couldn't see truly what was going on outside in the world outside, she knew that these things were taking place. She knew the seasons were changing. She knew that life went on. She knew that children were playing. And she was able to share that with the lady who could see nothing. The difference is in the perception. When the lady came into the bed beside the window and was asked to see what was outside, she could only see what her human eyes saw, even though if she looked deep within herself, she would be able to know and to share with the lady who couldn't see what was going on in the outside world. The lady who couldn't see had that ability, but the friend that she had that shared with her this information and helped her to remember it lifted her up out of her circumstance and situation and gave to her a different perception. In your life and in my life, we're challenged over and over again to choose how it is we view the things that we see, how it is we respond to the experiences of life. Some of the experiences are positive, some are negative. But as I said earlier, we live in our minds and not in the world. And the way that our mind acts, reacts to the circumstances and situations of life determines the quality of our being and the quality of our life. We're talking simply about whether or not we are optimistic or pessimistic in our life experience and our view of life. If we're optimistic, we're able to see and know that good and great and wonderful things are happening despite the appearances with our physical eyes and the experiences of our human life. The pessimist, on the other side, is constantly seeing negativity, is constantly looking toward the negative aspects of life. We always have a choice. You and I and all of us have a choice to be either the optimist or the pessimist. And in the midst of our most pessimistic view of life, there are opportunities for those who are optimists or who are positive to share their insight with those who have less clear vision. It has been said that some people live life not as an invocation, but as a benediction. They see every experience as the end, especially the negative experiences, the painful experiences, and the difficult experiences. What we're challenged to do is to live in our minds, to see with our mind's eye, and to respond in the dynamic of our mind action, to allow ourselves to see a beginning in every ending, and see every experience of life as one that brings us to an opportunity to either see what we see in a positive or in a negative way. There's another story that's told of a Methodist minister several years ago in the Midwest who had a terrible experience. His church had burned to the ground, and the congregation was left without a place of worship. And it just happened that Dr. Norman Vincent Peale was visiting the town at the time that this happened. And so this minister went out of his way to have a meeting with Dr. Peale. And of course, most of us know that Dr. Norman Vincent Peale is the father of positive thinking. He wrote and spoke and lived as an example of positive thought and the power of positive thought in the face of difficulty and challenge. And so this young Methodist minister went to see Dr. Peale, and he told him of his predicament, the fact that the church had burned to the ground, that they had no place to worship, and he was going to meet in an open-air meeting with his congregation the following Sunday. And he asked Dr. Peale, "What should I say to my congregation?" Dr. Peale's response to him was simply say, "Build bigger." That was to tell the congregation, we'll build a new church and we'll build a bigger church. The view that Dr. Peale was sharing was in the face of adversity and difficulty, the challenge is to see beyond the experience and to know that there's a way out, to know that there is an answer, and to know that the future creates for us opportunities. Every one of us have negative experiences in our lives. It doesn't matter what our religious faith is, what our traditions are, what our nationality is, what our heritage is. It doesn't matter who we are or where we are. We will all have negative experiences in life. That is part of the human condition, and it is part of the human pilgrimage into which we have all come in this spiritual trek that we're taking and the spiritual understanding and growth that's coming into our lives. With that in mind, it is incumbent upon us always to balance the negative experiences of life against the positive experiences of life, being aware that there will be sadness and there will be happiness, there will be failure and there will be success, there will be health and there will be illness. There will be a constant balancing of these two realities and experiences in every human life, some more than others. But we are challenged in our minds to balance the negative with the positive. And no matter how negative the experiences of life are, there are always positive aspects of our life. We have the positive aspects of the country in which we live, the opportunity that it brings, the freedom that we have. We have the simple pleasures of weather and sunshine and flowers. We also have other opportunities when we come together and we share with other people in relationship and in family. We share in work. There are many opportunities that we have to look at the positive aspects of life. And so our challenge is to see beyond the human experience that is negative and to choose always to focus the power and the dynamic of our mind upon the positive aspects of life. And when we do that, we make the conscious choice of being either an optimist or a pessimist, being positive or being negative. And as we cultivate and build the dynamic of our mind and strengthen our ability to see the positive aspects in the midst of adversity, we can overcome the negative aspects of our life and the negative process of thought. We live in our minds and not in the world. That simply means that every experience that you have, that I have, and that every human being has brings to us a choice. And the choice is to see it at face value, to see the circumstance and situation and allow it to paralyze us, or to see the circumstance and situation and in it raise our view high enough and out of the circumstance and situation so that our thinking changes in a positive and creative way. We live in our minds and not in the world. We believe in prayer as a centering force and as an opportunity for us to bring peace and harmony and balance into our lives. And so we invite you at this point in the program to pause for a few moments of prayer and reflection with us. Eternal God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the great thankfulness that we have for the optimistic and positive aspects of life. And in the midst of every negative experience, we call into our thought that which is positive, that which is uplifting, and that which blesses ourselves and others. We do these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
That was very dynamic thinking, that perception changes every aspect of life, every thought we have.
And thought is, of course, the most creative power that we have. And so as our thought process follows a certain line of thinking, we create an environment for ourselves, either positive or negative.
Yes. And then we live with that, and we live either happily or dejectedly. We live either in the pits or on the heights. And it's up to us. It's up to our own perception.
And perception is exactly what we were talking about. And perception is a choice. And we always have a choice. And the choice is either to keep our view on the negative or on the positive. And unfortunately, when we have negative experiences, and of course one of the most common that we can think about is health challenges or the loss of a job, the end of a relationship, limited resources, so often we see these circumstances and situations and begin to build a thought process that strengthens them instead of creating opportunities to move in other directions.
And when we lose sight of the long view, then we are more dejected at any adversity, because we know that we have to have negative and positive in life. We have to have the balance. And it's the balance that matters in the long run.
And the balance is so important because very often people of all religious backgrounds, but especially religious people, have so much difficulty trying to rationalize, to understand, or to seek the reason for negative influences or experiences in life. But negative experiences come to all of us. It has nothing to do with who we are.
And denial doesn't help us one bit. It just drags us down. So we have to go with it, go with the flow. And I think if we take vacations or take vacation from trouble, take some kind of vacation regularly, then we're more able to keep on keeping on, because we need the change of pace, because so often we get into ruts when we just live with our troubles and don't get out of them. But changing the environment just briefly will often make a difference.
The change in the environment, and also even if we're unable to make a change in environment, if we can make a change in our thought, if we can move our thought out of the problem or out of the situation.
Yes, just reading a good book or even just a daily devotional makes a big difference in the life of everyone.
And what we're talking about, as we said during the talk, doesn't have to do with a religious faith or changing the church we go to, or it has to do with all of us, regardless, and it has universal appeal in changing the way that we think. One of the things that you just said was creating the denial aspect of it. And that's very important, that we not deny the reality of the experience. If there is a negative experience, it is a negative experience. And it's all right that it's a negative experience. And we need not get into the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out why it's here or what brought it, but we can deny the power that it has over us.
Yes, I think so often we think the negative aspect of life is something we need to just ignore because it makes us seem less. Well, everyone has negative aspects in life. That's what life is about. We wouldn't have to be here on earth doing the things we do if we didn't have to work through the problems that we work through.
And one of the things that we believe fundamentally in New Thought is that life is a school of the soul.
Yes.
And so actually the negative experiences of life are not, as traditional people would say, permitted by God or created by God. They have nothing to do with God. It has to do with the fact that life brings to us the experiences that we need for our inner and spiritual growth.
That's the life plan. And of course, we believe in the law of cause and effect, you and I, and so do millions of other people in this world. And that is and that's karma, the law of cause and effect. As you sow, so shall you reap. And we have to work through specific problems in order to go on with our lives and drop those problems.
And the karmic issue is one that, again, people want to delve deeply into and understand. And so often what we need to do is to just deal with the circumstance. The circumstance presents itself, it's here, it's a part of our life, and so now what do we do?
As you so often say, living in the now is the important part, and not hassling the past, but just living in the now. And if we do, then we're working through the problem that we're facing, and we're looking for a better tomorrow, and we'll have that better tomorrow.
Mhm. And it all goes back to the dynamic of mind, which is so fundamental to what we believe and to our philosophy, and that is that creative power of mind. And so as we think, we're creating our environment, we're creating our life, and we're creating the life of those around us because we are creating a vibration that is either positive or negative.
As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, and that truly is. And I've seen people go through devastating things in their lives, and they come through victorious, and others go through minor things, and they come through very beaten down. And it's all in their own perception.
Mhm. The dynamic of mind.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens with the pessimist or the negative thinker is that as we move into negative experiences, as we all will, the negative experience begins that downward spiral. And if we don't have strength of mind, if we don't have the ability to change our way of thinking, the spiral just goes down farther and farther and farther until the person becomes more and more depressed, more and more paralyzed, more and more fearful, and life just loses all of its meaning.
And then they've lost all spirituality in their lives. And then it's when they look to God for guidance and to God the whole, and know that God is all in all, then it wouldn't matter what church they attend. It wouldn't matter their own spiritual beliefs. It's the spiritual strength they gain from that knowledge that matters.
Mhm. And remembering God's role in this whole process.
Yes.
So often we're willing to give everything to God, to attribute everything to God, and certainly the conventional view often teaches that. And in New Thought, we're constantly reminding people of the fact that God is a constant, that God's feeling for us, God's relationship with us, God's love for us never changes. And so as these experiences come into our life, and as we move through them, they are not touching God and God is not touching them. It's really something that we have to deal with.
Yes.
And the creative power of mind given to us by God and the connectiveness that we have with divine mind will guide and direct us, but we have to do the work.
God gives us all the tools we need. He gives us an immensity consciousness so that we can see the immensity of life and death and all beyond. And we can live in that immensity consciousness, or we can live in the little self, in the personality self. And it depends on our own way of thinking. I know that it's been said that if we change our vocation or habits every 20 years, but I think it's like every 2 or 10 years, it's not as much as 20, then we never grow old. And you know, that's true. People who have new interests in life are youthful forever.
Mhm. And those who embrace change
Yes.
are youthful
Yes.
forever.
That would be the new interests.
Yeah, change is so fundamental, and change is a part of life. And when we have these changes, to believe that they're all going to be positive and uplifting is simply not realistic, nor is it profitable from a physical or spiritual standpoint. But to know that they're going to come into our life, both these positive and negative experiences, and we're able to deal with them and cope with them. That's mental health and it's spiritual health.
Yes, the example you gave in the beginning of your talk just now was so wonderful, because it shows perception so very clearly that the lady who was so creative was such a blessing to the lady who couldn't see.
Mhm. And she herself, although she's not part of the
Yes.
story in terms of what she thought, but she is very much a dynamic part of the story, because here is someone who was able to see a block wall
Yes.
and yet was able to know that life was going on and to see and share with her friend that life was going on, and for her, life was going on as well.
She would have made a wonderful writer. She was so creative.
But the lady who succeeded her in the bed
Yes.
by the window was only able to see the block wall.
Yes.
And so her days may be days, weeks, or months. And think how unhappy her life would be, or how void her life would be compared to a life of visualizing or seeing the positive aspects of what was going on.
And we can apply that each to our own lives and know that each day we can apply that very rule. And that's the point of your story, I know. And that's what we need to do.
Mhm. We need to see life in a positive and uplifting way despite what we see with our human eyes.
Yes, it's the cliche. Some see a glass half empty and some see it half full. And those cliches are worth thinking about.
They are. In our teaching, we often talk about affirmations and denials, and I think that affirming the positive aspects of life and denying the power that the negative aspects of life have over us is fundamental to our philosophy and our faith. And the constant denial and the constant affirmation, that balancing creates within our mind a dynamic that allows us to deal with the circumstances of life more effectively.
Yes, and I'm sure you see that faith is the key there. If we have faith, then we can take anything in our stride. And if we don't have faith, then everything seems too much.
Mhm.
The people who are victorious in life and who say yes to life are those who have faith in a higher being, but yet know that they have to make their own decisions and their own and follow through on their own problems, and not expect God to do everything for them
Yeah.
or someone else to do everything for them.
You know, the topic of this segment is say yes to life.
Yes.
And saying yes to life means being able to say yes to everything,
Yes.
not only the joyful and happy things, but the negative things as well.
Those that come that we don't want, but to see where the blessing is. I know a lady who was in a terrible accident and she became paralyzed from her neck down just before Easter. And what a time for her family that was. But it strengthened all the family, and it strengthened her own beliefs. And she asked for her daily word, the little booklet, because she wanted to see what it said. And you know what it said for the day of her accident? That she was something about being paralyzed. And and she couldn't believe that. So the fact that that book said something about paralysis for her on the day that she became paralyzed from her neck down really gave her strength and courage to go on, because she could see a hand higher than her own there, and that she could cope with whatever came.
Mhm. And in that instance, there's a story that we would say is tragic and awful, and certainly it is a very negative change that has come into her life. But we have no way of knowing, nor does she have any way of knowing what is going to come from this experience, what
Exactly.
she is going to gain from it, what she is going to gain from enduring it, and from what those around her in her circle of family and friends are going to gain from the experience. And that's a tremendous example of the philosophy that we've been talking about. It is a negative experience, but in the midst of that negative experience, she has a choice.
Yes.
Not only does she have a choice to decide whether to make it and choose to claim it as a negative or positive experience, but her family and friends and everyone around her, and even people like you and I having a conversation at
Yes.
distance about her, have a choice of wringing our hands and saying, "Isn't it terrible?"
Yes.
Or the option of saying, "Well, it's God's will," which is an interesting concept that many people use very often, or simply saying that that's an experience that's come to this lady. Why it's come is not important. It has come, it's happened. And now that she is in the midst of it, what is she going to do? What are her loved ones and friends going to do? And what are all of us going to do in response to it? And the response is to see within it the reality that, yes, it's here, but it doesn't have to end her life and it doesn't have to end the other people's lives. It has to change their lives.
And can enrich their lives. And in fact, one result she already has seen happily is that her young grandson, who was into gangs and doing things he ought not to do, has changed 100%. And he's come back to his father's home and is being a very diligent son and grandson, as opposed to running in a wild way. So she's so grateful for that, and she sees that already. That accident was only a week ago today, and yet she's already seeing good from it.
Mm-hmm. And that really has to do with the dynamic of her mind.
Yes.
And the kind of person that she has been, and the ability that she has to change her thinking and thereby change the quality of her life. Undoubtedly, there are going to be monumental difficulties for the family and for her. And there are going to be very depressing and sad times. But in the midst of all of it, everyone has a choice. And the choice is always to see the negative or to see the positive, and to decide which it is that's going to control their life.
Yes. Well, it's just so very exciting to see her use this as a stepping stone, and not as a stone around her neck, but rather a stepping stone to a better, higher life. And that's what your talk was all about, saying yes to life. She is accepting what happened because it happened.
And saying yes to all of life,
Yes.
no matter what.
Yes, and that's so important that we remember that if we could just always remember that there's a good from every incident, there's good from everything, and not woe is me, but to look for the good and praise it.
And if we center on that woe is me, we become more paralyzed, we become more ineffective, and life loses all of the luster that it has.
Yeah. Well, saying yes to life is a way of spirituality. It's leading a life of spirituality as opposed to non-spirituality. And again, it doesn't matter what our religious faith is. It's the religious faith that is important.
The faith that all things are working together for good, the faith that no matter what, we can have solutions and we can have direction and we can have guidance.
And we can control our destiny. Things happen that we don't like, but we can control how we react to those. I know there was a woman whose family was pretty not very nice to her. And one time someone asked her, I hope your family's doing better because they must be, you're looking better. And she said, no, my family is still giving me a hard time, but I've changed. And she had changed.
She changed her way of thinking, and as she changed her way of thinking, her life changed. Reverend Freelander and I have been sharing with you ideas of ways to say yes to life, and we hope that you found this information useful and helpful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Helps me be strong, confident living, comforts my heart from such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within.